Hi, friends, and welcome to Peace is Here. I'm your host, Avis. Today marks the final episode of the Wolff Peace Series, where we paired the thinkers in Robert Paul Wolff's Political Man and Social Man with peace warriors from across history. It's a moment of closure, but also an invitation. If you're just discovering this series now, I hope you'll consider going back to episode 45 and listening through. Each thinker, each peace warrior, each conversation builds on the last, and they brought us to this final moment, one I didn't know I was headed toward when I first picked up this book. I have a confession. I started this series without telling you the full story. My mother ran a free library in my little town, and many of the books came through donation. One of them, Political Man and Social Man by Robert Paul Wolff, had the handwritten name written inside of someone I admire deeply in our local farming community. I won't share their name for privacy, but seeing it handwritten in this book makes me smile. They've been a beautiful kind of anarchist in their own right, one rooted in land, labor, and quiet resistance. And so I started reading and recording and reflecting. But in this final episode, I wanted to pause and ask, who was Robert Paul Wolff when he wrote this book in 1966? And who was he near the end of his life when so much of the world he studied was still unraveling and being reimagined? Robert Paul Wolff was born in 1933. He earned his Ph.D. in philosophy from Harvard in 1957, and by the mid-60s, he was teaching at Columbia University, a campus at the heart of one of the most turbulent decades in American history. 1966, the year the book was published, saw the escalation of the Vietnam War. The civil rights movement was beginning to take new shape through Black Power. Student protests were igniting across the country. Columbia itself would soon become a center of student rebellion against racism, militarism, and the university's ties to government power. So it's not surprising that Political Man and Social Man reads like a map of unrest. It's filled with essays on anarchism, revolution, alienation, suicide, social psychology, and total institutions. Wolff wasn't simply surveying the world, he was offering a curriculum for moral and political resistance. And he didn't stay at a distance. Wolff opposed the war, spoke out, and later co-founded the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies at UMass Amherst, an early and radical effort to place Black thought at the heart of higher education. Another thing I wondered was, what did his students think of him? From what I've found, he was known as brilliant, fearless, sometimes intimidating, but also deeply generous. His thinking was sharp, but never cold. He mentored generations of students, including Cornel West, a renowned philosopher, civil rights activist, and recent U.S. presidential candidate who studied under Wolff at Harvard and described him as someone who never flinched from naming injustice, even when the academic world softened its edges or looked away. Wolff never stopped teaching. In his later years, he ran a blog called The Philosopher's Stone, where he reflected on Marx, capitalism, American politics, and sometimes aging, memory, and the absurdities of life. He even recorded lecture series on YouTube, full of clarity, edge, and humor. I'll be getting to know Robert Paul Wolff better. Thank goodness there are videos, his blog, and more books to explore. You can find a link to his YouTube lectures in the show notes. Wolff passed away in early 2025, several months before I found the book and started this series. Wolff writes in the final section of his anthology, "Sociology poses for us the perennial problem of lost innocence. Once we understand the ways in which the integrity of personality is sustained or destroyed, we have no choice but to debate the extent and nature of the legitimate uses of that knowledge." This was a series about that very question. Over 33 episodes, we moved from Hobbes to Dostoevsky, from power and revolution to conscience and community. Alongside each political thinker, I placed a peace warrior, with the help of AI, someone who lived justice in their bones. The thinkers gave us structure, the peace warriors gave us breath. We explored anarchism, obedience, alienation, suicide, conscience, and healing. We heard from Malala Yousafzai, Bell Hooks, Jean Vanier, Eddie Hillesum, Eleanor Roosevelt, Nelson Mandela, and so many more. We asked again and again, what does peace really require, and what kind of people do we have to become to build it? Wolff helped frame the questions. This series was one way of beginning to live them. While there is certainly no proper way to acknowledge a life in a few words, I hope these episodes cause at least a few, and hopefully more, to discover the dedicated work of Robert Paul Wolff. His voice, stubborn and searching, shaped generations of students and thinkers. He made space for questions too often ignored about disobedience, alienation, power, and moral courage. And through this anthology, he showed that resistance isn't a refusal to care, it's a deeper form of care. We've ended each of these episodes with peace questions to ponder. Let's continue that. Big picture, what kind of world do we create when we allow conscience to guide institutions? What does it mean to lose innocence and still choose integrity? Day to day, where are you asked to conform, and what part of you resists quietly, strongly? Who in your life still holds on to their humanity, even within inhumane systems? Coming up next on Pieces Here, The Great Disfarmament. This new series looks at the strange shared history of modern weaponry and industrial agriculture. What if disarmament wasn't just about guns and bombs, but also about plows, patents, pesticides, and pipelines? We'll trace the turning points when food and violence became linked and spotlight stories of people breaking that cycle with courage, care, and imagination. That concludes this episode of Pieces Here. You can learn more at aviskolfsbeck.com, where I share updates on this podcast and my books, including the newly released novella Mano Mutante, a story about food, friendship, and finding peace in the soy-soaked heart of industrial ag Iowa. I write best friend activist short fiction in my Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet 6-book series. Coming up next, more thinkers, more peace pairings, and more bold questions from the Wolff Peace Series. This episode is human narrated by me, but was created with the help of AI, which has promised to let me know if it makes something up. So far, no confessions, but if you believe I've missed something, or if you just want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Podcast music is Dalai Lama Riding a Bike by Javier Peque Rodriguez. Links to his music on Spotify and Bandcamp are in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, it really helps me if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, or send it to a friend. I'm Avis Kolfsbeck, and I write the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet book series, which are a series of environmental adventure novellas. Books 1 through 6 are available at all your favorite online bookstores or at aviskolfsbeck.com. Go to aviskolfsbeck.com to be notified when new books come out. Thank you again. Until next time, listen for the peace.